All right, start recording.
All right.
Cool. Hey everyone, sorry for the delay. So, having internet troubles, but whatever. We're instead of the live stream. Not that you guys care about the live stream this month. We're just going to record it. And it's going to be available later on. So, welcome to the May monthly Python meeting, and everyone's already been talking, which is great. It's always better than a quiet meetup start. If you haven't come up already, there's a bunch of stickers. If you don't have a Python sticker yet, I got plenty for you to cover your laptop with. And if you have any stickers from other conferences, or if your company makes a bunch of stickers, you want to add it to the pile, I will keep bringing this every single month from now on. Cool. So for this month, we're going to have a quick data talk from Solomon, and we're going to look at the Django REST Framework, building something from scratch, getting up and running. I already have a code repository up. I will be better about posting the code that we build during the meetings, and it's already hooked up to Heroku, so as soon as we push up code, we'll have something live that everyone can pull data from, which should be pretty cool. So we're here at the Herndon County, the Herndon branch of the Orange County Library, which I think is pretty cool. The second time we've been in here, having a converted space in the strip mall. And so we're not doing the live stream, but things are available at watch.pyorl.org. All the previous talks going back 2.5 years, almost 3 years at this point that we've been recording things. We have an opening for a talk next month. The guy who was previously there had to reschedule for sometime later this fall, which is going to be a robotics-based talk. We have someone that does want to speak on a shorter talk about a library that he recently published up to GitHub. So we're still looking for either a main talk or a couple small talks if you're willing to speak. And I also respect not wanting to record your talk if you so choose. We work with everyone that wants to deal with that. PyCon was at the beginning of this month. I got the t-shirt. I got a bunch of stickers from there, which prompted me to bring everything out. There's a bunch of talks if you want to go see them. Let's reload this page. A bunch of talks have been posted from PyCon. You'll be able to find it on YouTube at PyCon 2019. Some talks I would really recommend. One of the keynotes was by Russell Keith McGee, which was about the future of Python. He is one of the co-founders of the Beware app group. They are trying to take Python and put it into places that Python was not meant to go, like mobile apps. I believe there is a project called Briefcase that he was also a part of. Don't quote me on that. But the reason why I bring it up is because multi-gigabyte files are not a big deal nowadays. If you play a game, it's not that uncommon to have a 10 gigabyte update for a game. So if you can fit the entire language, like Python, in 50 megabytes, you can include the entirety of the runtime language in an exe along with your project code, and you can just ship Python applications anywhere you want nowadays. That's one of the things that they are trying to do. I would highly recommend his talk. And if you ever do go to any of these Python conferences, I would highly recommend something called Hallway Track or Expo Track or Open Talk Track, as opposed to all of the different talks that they do have, because the talks all get put on here. You can watch them all after the fact. But there are easily about 200 talks, and almost all of them are here. There were 2 keynotes that were corrupted during the recording, and it was very unfortunate for those 2. But check these out. They're great. And I was also trying to get some streaming gear. We're going to do better than trying to just point the camera at the screen for visiting talks. I know, as cheap as that is, the quality is not as great after the fact, so continue trying to make that work. And we'll also should also have this working next month, having a GoPro camera, but I'm waiting on one more piece of hardware to get that in. So even if screen capture doesn't work, we'll have a better high quality camera than is built into the laptop.
4K, baby.
Oh yes. So with all of that stuff out of the way, we'll turn over to Solomon here to start us off.
All right. So what I am going to discuss today is just going to be short and brief, and it's going to be focusing on data analysis. And I don't know if anybody that's in here that used Python data analytics, that's one of my previous employers. That was one thing that I used. And the one part of Python in particular with data analytics I use is in the pandas library. Anybody familiar with pandas? Powerful stuff, right? So when it comes to data analytics, you can either use most people either use pandas or NumPy. I particularly don't really use NumPy that much. I know in the world of data science, they use that a lot because there's some things that you can maneuver with. And also in the world of machine learning, where you use it logistical regression, linear regression, you may use NumPy with that. But I've also used pandas, and if I want to do, let's say, a linear regression, I can use that the pandas data to jump into that. So with this, what I have here, this is actually something that I'm actually working on with a buddy of mine. This is dealing with the getting data from the NFL. This is the standings in 2019. And actually, I don't want to put him out there, but he was the one that actually started the first piece of the data, which is...
You lied, you did it.
It wasn't me. It was this guy here.
Can everyone in the back see the text?
Can you see the text?
Make it a little bigger.
Sure. That better? Okay. And this is more of the, basically the back end. This is not really the data analysis, but this is how you pull the data out. And the reason why I have this out right now is because I'm just showing you the steps of developing this, I guess the first step of the API, but within the API, there is some data analysis that you need to actually pull the data. And really, in the world of data analytics, it's not always just computing data. Sometimes it's just knowing how to manipulate the data. So further in, you'll see that all this just looks gobbledygook. You have, you probably can see the names of the teams here. You see a whole bunch of different standings, probably wins, losses, but really what you have here is just a bunch of lists, a bunch of strings here. And from here is actually brought into another list here, but what I'm going to do is actually show you how I get from this all the way to here. And even from here, that's not really complete. But I only got a few minutes, so what I'm going to do is jump right into all the way over here. And that's what the goal for me is, to actually, that in the beginning where there was a bunch of lists, a bunch of strings, I'm actually trying to make it similar to where if I go and actually go on this link here, it will look something similar to this, with the exception of adding offensive ranks and defensive ranks, because my goal here is to use all those different API, all those different wins and losses, and down the road, I'm trying to predict which NFL team in the AFC has a chance to actually win, actually will be a playoff contender, not win the Super Bowl, but actually be in the playoffs for 2019. But as you see, it's Rome isn't built in a day, and creating code and creating APIs will not be within a day. So going back to this, I do apologize if I'm going a little too fast. I just want to show you guys that, with this, you can actually have something that are just a bunch of strings and lists and actually put it in a nice data set. And with that, there's a thing there's a library that's called Pandas. And then within Pandas, you're able to manipulate data and put it into a data frame. What a data frame is, it's just it's a list. I mean, it's basically a list of columns and rows where you have an index. Some some data frames don't have an index, but you have an index to pretty much make your data look pretty. And if anybody that's in that do anything with data analytics, maybe data science, or even any job that they're asking you to do some Excel work, they will like to have their data sets nice and pretty. People that's out of the world of coding, and this is one of the things you do. So the first step we like to do is actually.
No.
Uh-oh.
Go back.
Oh. There we go. Right before I tell you the good stuff. So the first thing you want to do is actually input pandas as input pandas. And what I have here is the Jupyter notebook. Anybody familiar with Jupyter? It's awesome when it comes to data analytics. And the reason for it is because when you have the Anaconda prompt here, once you download it, it basically has a lot of the stuff that you need in data analytics. So if you have your NumPy, your sklearn that's used for machine learning, your pandas, and other different libraries. So the first thing you want to do is input pandas as PD. And again, don't worry about the import request. That's all the stuff that was prior. And that's not really data analytics. That's more so like back-end stuff where you're actually in the data in. I mean, that's basically web scraping. That was the pieces how you scrape the data. So going into this, what I did is I put in a data frame, and with here, I have different headers, and those different headers, again, that's when you're scraping the data, there were different parts in the HTML, and I'm sure a lot of you know what HTML is. That's that's basically all the information inside a inside a web page. But basically, what Carlos did, he was able to find a way to actually take out what was needed, the TD, and I was able to pull out all that data. And then what I did, I said, okay, now I know where they're at. I can actually put different headers, and you can put any name that you want. And actually, I have it. I'd like to show you what it looks like. I know if I actually show you it, it'd probably throw off my data. But basically, each header is a different team with a different stat and a different rating. And from there, I put all of them into a data frame. I put rank 2 because I have an offense stats that I want, and I have defense stats. And then when I put it out like this, it just comes out like this. I have New England, I have all these teams, but as you can see in a data frame in Pandas, it will automatically put, if you don't have any headers, if you have no names on each column, it will automatically put numbers on there. So in Python, it always starts from 0. So it'll start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Same thing with the rows, it'll go from there. And The second thing I did, there's two more things I'm going to show you. This and then how I concatenate it. The second thing is the columns. And with this, I actually just added columns. And one good thing about Pandas, it's in Python in general, the only thing you need to do is just put the dot columns, and then you put brackets on each side, and then put in the different column names you want to put in. And then from there, it will actually give you all the different names of the columns for each, the names for each column. You guys are with me?
Question, Tom.
Yes.
Now that you put those text labels on the columns, can you refer to those data, those cells by the label?
Very good question. And the answer is yes. So one thing, and you know what, I'll just pull out right here. Let's say,
They're not.
it's not letting me. That's weird.
You can hit that twice.
It's not letting me click. That's weird. Well, to answer your question, if I wanted to just pull out a specific, since we already got the column names, all we have to do is just put the bracket, and then you put in parentheses that name. It will pop out. But the one thing about it, if you put, let's say, I put defensive rank, and that's supposed to be rank 2, and I put in the bracket, let's say defensive rank, it'll just show you that list of the defensive rank. So it'll just show you all of them. Yeah. And I know we're running out of time.
No, you're good.
Okay. The second thing I want to show you is that with the ranks, if you want to set the, well, here we go. Going back up here, there is no index. And you can do it without index, but because in this type of data set, I have an offensive list and I have a defensive list. And those are coming from two different websites, well, basically two different web pages. And what I want to do is combine them together so I can get one master list of offense and defense for each team. And for that, you need something that will let Pandas know, let Python know that these two can connect. And the reason why I'm reiterating this for a lot of you guys is because when I first started in Python, and especially in Pandas, you would think that when you concatenate, and what concatenating means is just you're putting the two data frames together. And when you're doing that, you need either an index or some type of key that's similar to let them know that, okay, these two can match. If not, it will give you a traceback. And I was actually helping someone that was actually struggling with that. And a lot of it is because even though, let's say I have this same data set, I have defensive ranks, I have the same exact team, I have everything the same. If I merge them without any type of same index, Python won't know. It'll still think they're two different data sets, and you'll still get a traceback. So it's important to have an index. So that's why I set the index here as an index name teams there, so that when I put R2, it will say teams. And last but not least is the concatenate. And the concat tool is very powerful because you're able to concatenate on the axis, meaning with the columns, or you can concatenate with rows. And hopefully this thing works. Oh, that's good. So let me go back to here to show you what you were asking. Again, trace back. It's okay. Ah, it works. So when you when you have those column names, one thing you do is just put the brackets and then put the two different apostrophes and put the name there. And like I said, it will just only give you that list there. Now, I could, maybe next time, there is a way where, let's say, oops, let's say if I want the defensive rank team only from defensive rank through defensive yards, I can use, oh wow, I have a brain fart, excuse me. I can use low, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. If you want to pull out more than one, there's a couple of different ways. You can use team rank. Oops. And actually, two columns. So,
You have to select array.
oops. I think it's this. If I'm not mistaken. Well, let's see. Nope.
Extra space. It's inner space. Space.
Oh, wait. It might be this. If not, I'll get back to that at the end. All right, I'll get back to that at the end. So the last step is to concatenate. And let me show you the offense real quick. With the offense, it still has that teams, and you can put any index in there, but I just put teams there because there's already a column named teams with one S. And what I did to make my life easier, because in the world of Python, you don't want to make life hard, you want to make life easier, right? So what I, oops. Here we go. I just concatenate the offense with rank 2. I just put that name because in my mind it was just easier. And then I put access equal 1. When you put access equal 1, it'll just put the columns there. But let's say I didn't want to do that. I just put it like that. Oh. I guess Samsung didn't like what I did.
Samsung's judging you.
I know. Uh-oh. I'm not.
It's because you're on HP.
Oh, I see. Touche. Touche. got one. Ah, this is a very important moment. Come on. Come on, Samsung. I got a Samsung phone. Come on. Well, if for some reason it's still acting like this, okay.
Maybe. It really doesn't like your machine.
No, it doesn't. So to wrap it up, I wanted to show you guys that if I put it on the rows, it will just give me nans. And the reason for it,
Just explain
yeah,
the last
the
bit.
reason
Yeah.
for it is because even though I have the right indexes, the now is the list of columns, now they're different. So it's giving me those nans because those keys are not the same. So at the end of the day, if you are in a situation you are using Pandas or NumPy or any data analytics data set, or even if you're not doing data analytics, you're doing something where you need to concatenate or merge data, always make sure the keys are the same. And even though your two data sets might look the same, make sure you have some type of key, maybe, usually the index or even a column depending on the situation. Like let's say if you're using the merge method, which is a different one. There's merge, there's concatenate, and for people that are familiar with SQL, there's a join that Python also uses. And with all of them, you always need some type of key that is very similar to each other. If not, it will not. You will get a trace back, and you have to find a way to make sure those keys are aligned. But that's my 5 to 10 minute Panda chit chat that actually turned into 20 minutes, and I'm gonna give it back to Mike.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, Solomon.
No problem. Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions at the end?
Quick question, just about the general question. So you said you're going to take the data and basically kind of figure out which team is going to have the probability of making the playoff next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what module are you using? Like, you're going to train the data, right? Like that you
Yeah.
have. What module do you usually use to train and test the data to get like the probabilities?
So for this, there's multiple ways we can go about it. There's linear, there's logistical, there's random forest. Now with this one, I actually did research on how they did with the NCAA college basketball predictions, and with them they use random forest, and that would be something I would use. Also, I may use logistical regression. I know I cannot use linear regression because with each, and this is in the lines of stats, and it's not a bad thing just to take a quick little Udemy stats class, but basically each one of them has its own purpose. And I know with linear regression, if I want to get the data set from 0 to 1, you can't use linear regression because it goes past that. Logistical regression, it'll keep you in that 0 to 1, so that when I get the wins and losses, I'm not getting a negative 300 something. I'm getting from 0 to 1 because the percentages is from 0 to 1. So I may use logistical regression too if for some reason that doesn't work. But again, when it comes to when you get into that machine learning piece, it's just a lot of trial and error. To be honest, sometimes you gotta play with the data and see what will really fit the data and what makes sense. And that's another piece with data analysis that I had to learn the hard way, is that you actually have to, sometimes you have to like really use a lot of critical thinking skills and really see like, does this make sense? does this work? Even though the code execute, but does this really work? And that's something that, it's always good to know when it comes to this stuff. No problem.
Okay. Thank you again. Okay. Now, I forgot to ask at the very top, who here is this their first time coming out to Orlando Python? Very cool.
Nice.
Half the room. I like it. Okay. So for the remaining time, we're going to build a Django app from scratch with the Django REST Framework. How many people have used Django before? Okay, a couple. Django REST Framework. One and a smidge. Cool. This is going to be great. If you for those who have not been to the Python Meetup before, whenever I give a talk, I like building things from scratch, and we build it together. And feel free to interrupt me at any point of view of questions. Tangents are my favorite. Okay. So, Django is a batteries included web framework that allows you to build to build server-side web applications using Python. The Django REST framework allows you to take the data models that you've created for your application and present them as a REST framework so that developers or the front end can be built using the data that your Django app and models manage. So I've created an empty repository here at GitHub, it's Orlando Python, no space, all lowercase. That's the organization for this group. So all I'm going to do is copy this down, and we'll get started. So let me make this bigger. We're not going to be in here very long, but just getting this started. I'm gonna get onto desktop. We're going to clone this locally. There we go. Not a whole lot in there. And then I am going to start our code editor. And in we go. Get rid of you. So, first things first, just going to create a requirements.txt file. This is how Python we specify our requirements, or the code requirements and packages that we need. Just to get started, all we need is the Django REST framework. That's it. So all we need to do. Oh, I forgot to set this up beforehand. I use Anaconda as my environment manager, so let me quickly go ahead and create a new environment for us to work in.
Is that the same as the virtual environment?
Yeah, it's the same concept. It's a little different. So virtual environment, the venv package comes with your installs of Python. If you're familiar with Node, to some degree, what it does is, the Node uses npm and the Node packages folder to keep all of the packages for your application in the repository in the high-level repository that you're currently using. And you're still using the system version of Python or whatever Python you used or you called venv with. What Anaconda allows you to do in terms of an environment manager is create environments that might have different Python numbers. So you saw I can choose between 2.7, 3.5, 6, and 7. And instead of these being tied to an individual repository, they are embedded in elsewhere in the system. So if you have, say you're working on the same backend but a different component, you can have both of them pointing to the same environment, and they'll share repositories in that way. Another thing that Anaconda does, especially if you're on Windows, is that Conda and Conda Forge provide precompiled binaries for your libraries for the whatever platform you're currently running on. So if you are on Windows and you need to install SciPy, you don't have to install a Fortran compiler. They've already done it for you. All right, so I'm just going to activate our env here called show. And to install everything, I'm going to install from our requirements file, collecting the Django REST Framework. And the convenient thing about the, no, it's not in there. Oh, they use a different thing. Let me double check on their website, which is a convenient time for me to bring up the docs. Nope. If you are getting started with any project, it's always a good idea to look at the docs, and we will definitely be coming back to these. Django REST Framework. I did not, or I put an extra thing in here, so just double check. Yep. Oh, and PSA. Note that I had a hyphen in there, and it did match to a library. This is the same kind of thing that people do with malicious URLs. So if you've been to Google with one O or two Gs, same kind of deal. People will put these out there and hope that you get to there. Beware of that. Anyway, let's go ahead and redo that. The reason why that kind of tipped me off is because 001, Django REST Framework has been around for a while. Other thing I need to do in here is actually include Django, because Django REST Framework is not doesn't actually include that in there. So let's just run this again. Hold down Django. And off we'll go. There we go. So now the way that you start with a Django, you start a Django app fresh, is you don't, most projects you just start, app.py if you're doing a web framework like Flask. Django, because it is batteries included, includes this a couple of utilities like, oh, it's not Django. I think it's just Django admin to get started. Yes. So not create, it's start project. Oh, and I need to give it the name. So first thing is we're going to call this show app. Oh, that's right. You know, it's been a while since I've started a Django project.
You only started once.
This is also very true. Because what it did right there is it created this show app folder for us, which includes our very important manage.py. And personally, what I do in this case, I actually, I'm just going to do that. And I prefer to pull these out. You don't have to. At a certain project size, you should have everything in there, as opposed to having different apps in your higher level directory. But for the purposes of this, we don't need to. So now we have this in here. It includes all of our the settings that we need to start off with. I'm not going to go into details on all of these, and we will come in here and take care of our URLs in a second. And WSGI is used by whatever tool we're going to use to serve our app. What we need to do right now is we have this manage.py, and this is going to take the place of our Django admin command. So all we need to do is call Python, do manage.py, and we're going to start app, and it's going to be called show. Now we have, so this is our project, solve our higher level things. Django splits things out into apps, so we have a show app right here with empty files that we will need to populate. The first thing that we need to do is create a model. So just to get something up and running so we can move on to the REST API part of this, we're going to create a show models.model. And let's say a show has three things. It has a name, it has a network, and let's give it a rating because we're in control of how much we like our shows. Have a name. Should be models. Oh, I don't think I have it connected up. Let's put this, yeah, show down there. Now I should get my IntelliSense. There we go. Character field. Off we go. And let's say max length is 128. We have our network, which is also going to be a character field. Let's do that again. And a rating, which is an integer field. Let's see, just doing that in my head. I think if we do it, if we specify later that it can only be between 1 and 10, an infield of 5 should be good, 5 bits. And that is our entire model. So, continuing to move on ahead, manage.py, we need to create migrations. Now, what we've done here so far, oh yeah, make migrations. What we've done, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, what we're doing here, creating this model, is we are beginning to fill out an ORM, an Object Resource Manager, and it is a way to model your database in code so you can check it into your source control. What we need to do first, that I forgot, is we need to add our show app to our installed apps. Now, this is a lot of stuff that we're not going to get into. We've done a purpose-built group coding session thus far on Django itself, and we can always go into these more in depth later on. But all we need to do right now is, after the base components, we need to add our show app into our source or our main app here. And now if we run make migrations, it should detect it. Okay, so now we have a couple things we need to fix. We need to do a keyword assignment. So max length instead. And for the sake of not getting that same thing, I'm just going to get rid of that because I don't think we actually need it for the demo. There we go. So now we have a migration. And to finally apply it, we run migrate. It runs all of the standard stuff, and the last thing it does is run our show migration to create that. So we now have a SQLite database down here. I don't have a thing that will show me what it is, but by default, it will just create a local database for testing. When you go into production, you'll want an actual database like Postgres, MySQL, whatever you need that lives, for development on your machine and for production off of your machine. All right. So that is all we need to do right now to get started with the REST framework. What you would go on, what you would start doing from here is you would start building views that, and you to actually build out the HTML for your site. And just to show that we do in fact have something that works already out of the box, if we do Python manage.py and run server, we'll be able to go to our local host on 8000 here, and we'll get the default view saying that we actually do have a full-fledged Django server up and running. But we don't yet have anything. We don't yet have a way to integrate our model that we created. One thing I can do before we start adding that is you might notice that in our URLs we already have an admin portal set up. That comes out of the box with Django. We don't have a user yet that we can use to get into it, so there is a command to, it's not make, because that's what always gets me, it's create super user. So we can create an admin user. I'm just going to leave it as me, don't need an email, and just going to create a little password here. All right, now if we go back to run server, go to admin and log in with that. We already have an admin portal that has you have groups. This is the stuff that comes with it, but there's our super user to very quickly add our existing model into the admin portal. I need to actually look that up. I could look back on my own code, but this is going to be faster. Bzz, bzz. There we go. Admin site register. Perfect. So, admin site here. We need to, from show.models, import our show. Then we register the show model with our admin portal. We're in development mode right now, so it's already reloaded itself. Come back over here, home, and now we have our shows that we can create. So just to put one in there, rest in peace, Game of Thrones. You were part of HBO. And let's just give you a 9, because you were great until the end.
Yeah.
And we'll just save you. We now have an object in here. Oh, very quickly, because this always annoys me. And if you want a practical use for your repr, by the way, for Python, whenever you print an object directly out into the console, it uses the repr, the representation of the object. We can very quickly come down in here and we can overwrite it, def repr. Self just gives us an object way to access our name, network, and rating and other things. So let's just return self.name. Yeah. Oop.
str string.
Is it repr or string?
That's what I've used.
Well, I'm gonna hedge my bets.
That was our-
Yeah, I think it's repr, but honestly, I'm just gonna do this. Here, I'll just make sure they're both there.
You know what, it probably needs to be a string, so
Yeah.
you may
Or
need to return a string of self.name, because that's an object, right?
I think it automatically stringifies itself whenever you do a character field.
Find out in a minute.
There we go. That makes so much more sense. Okay, so we have an app. It's up and running. We have models. We have a way to create them. So we have something that's already populated in there. Let's get into the REST framework. Am I going too fast for anyone? Are there any questions? Questions in the back? Cool. Oh,
Does Django use like native server, like, or does it have a built-in server?
it for the debug mode, it's running pure Python. What you would do with these applications is you would run them on a Whiskey server, and it blew my mind at PyCon talking with some of the guys that work on and maintain these different frameworks. It's that wsgi.py file that was in our main app. That is pronounced whiskey. Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Oh, and another thing. The reason why the reason why the Flask framework is so named is because you put whiskey in flasks. And then guess what? Guess what you use to manage all of these different web frameworks that run on top of Whiskey? Beer Garden. It just started with WSGI, Whiskey, and there's a lot of names like that. I also learned how to pronounce Worksug, which is the templating engine that is, I think, Jinja2. It's either Jinja2 is built on top of Worksug or
Jinja2
the
is the templating language. Worksug
Works.
is a bunch of tools that are inside Flask.
Yeah. I didn't know how to pronounce that until a month ago.
I don't even know where I pick up the pronunciations of half the things in Python.
When in doubt, trust the pronunciation of the people that maintain the library. Okay, so let's jump into the Django REST framework. Just like we had to do with our show, we need to make sure that our REST framework is installed in the list of installed apps, and we're going to go ahead and put that above our app that we use or above the app that is going to use the REST framework in the code. That is how you add it. Not going to deal with that yet. And I'm hoping this is the only setting that we actually need for the time being. Just going to jump all the way down to the bottom here. Yeah, permission or non-read only. So that should work just fine for now. That's just saying who can access the information. Do you need to be authenticated or not? But we'll get into that in just a second. So, first thing that we can do is this is actually their example is putting everything into a single file. Let's not do that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a serializer for this model. Now, a serializer is just a way of saying how can I take my model and convert it in and out of a native data format like JSON. So we're going to create a serializers.py from REST framework import serializers. We're going to create a show serializer that extends serializers dot maybe. Let's see what you have down here. Use hyperlinked. Oh, don't need that. It just needs a model serializer. Now the great thing about using an ORM like this with Django and the Django REST framework is that they have classes for everything. Use your classes. So instead of having to say, well, name goes to this, and the network and the rating go to this, they already know how to get data in and out of an integer field. So all we need to do to create this serializer is to say, well, the model equals show, and I do need to do from show.models. Whatever. This computer is 5 years old now. It has a bunch of stuff that Apple's complaining about is not up to date. It's next year or two probably. So that's all we need to do. We now have a serializer. Another thing we need, in the same vein, we need a view. And we will do that in our views.py down here. We actually don't need our render shortcut. That's just rendering the template to build out your HTML page. We're not building HTML here. We can get rid of it. So from our REST framework, I believe import generics would be the best thing to do here for the time being, rather than a model view set. Now, generics are generic views. And to give you an example, we're going to create our show view, which is going to extend generics dot, let's do a list create API view. Now, a list create API view is going to allow us to, if we do get it's going to give us a list of all the different shows in our server. And if we do a post, it is going to create a new one. That's going to be a good place to start. And again, all we need to do is model equals show, and need to import it again. Dot models import our show, and we also need to do from show dot serializers import our show serializer. So model equals show, and our serializer, I think it is, now let's try serializer first. Let me double check that. No, it is serializer class. Serializer class equals show serializer. And that's it for our view. There's one more thing we need to do, and we need to assign, which is to assign this view to a URL that we can use. Now, my preferred way of doing that is to create a brand new urls.py file in here, but I think we'll be able to get away with not doing that. Oh,
Would you use include for that?
yeah, you would use include. I think I'm just gonna do the separate URLs file. So let's just do urls.py URL patterns. I swear at some point this all becomes boilerplate. It's just the fact that we're building this out for the first time. After that, you can cut, copy, and put in there. It's really fast. And conf URLs. From Django.conf.urls import, and I think all we need to do right now is have path. No, you do URL. So URL, we're going to give it, I think we can just give it blank one. We do need to from show import views dot show view dot as view. Hopefully that works. Then over in here, need to do include, and I believe, I think we also need to do URL. So this, we give it a root that it can use, and then do include, and then as a string, like it shows down here, we give it the name of the app, .urls, whatever file it's going to be looking for URL patterns. So show.urls. Fingers crossed that everything works. Cannot import URL from Django URLs. Oh. Django.conf.urls. Import include URL. Okay. Now, let's see what happens if we go to localhost 8000 and show.
It should be a terminal.
Hey, we got something that says it's there.
It's progress.
That is definitely progress. So the exact thing that we're seeing right here is that it's not actually models. It's looking for query set, or it's looking for both, I think. And that's just saying that when someone calls this with no filtering information at all, what should I return in the first place? So you can say if they don't ask for anything, only give them the first 10 based on some sorted order. That's what we're missing there. So instead of doing models, what it's looking for here is query set, and we're just going to follow the same pattern. So back in our views, it's not model, we're doing query set equals show dot objects dot all, and what's just going on there is shows the model, but to actually access the objects that it manages, we need to do dot objects, and then you apply a filter expression, which in this case is dot all. We could do filter or limit or any of the SQL like things that you might want to ask. So maybe it works. Class is missing meta. Okay, so our serializer, don't need you.
Does that mean a field?
Yeah, so instead of this, I need to add the meta. So it's not just model there, because another reason why I love live coding is that if you're starting this and you see a perfect demo and you get something wrong, it's a very unrealistic development expectation. So I am always happy to mess up, usually live, in front of everyone, because a normal development process is, oh, that didn't work. Quickly Google, okay, what do I need to do to fix it? So back in our serializers, what would be at the top level of the serializers here is if you wanted to either add or overwrite individual fields that need serialization. But we can embed a class in another class, because you're allowed to do whatever you want. Is embed a meta that specifies the model, and then if you want to do then specify the different fields from that model that you want. So we had name, network, and rating. Reloading. Let's try again. Let's see what else we need to fix. We don't need to fix anything, because there it goes. All right. So if you're I believe I'm not sure if this screen is available all the time. I know this is what gets returned if it sees that a web browser is requesting it, and it might also only be available if you're in debug mode, which when you're in development, you're in debug mode. If we were to take this URL and go to Insomnia, which is just a REST client, anything else that is akin to it, there we go. Let's create a new request and make everything bigger. Create a GET request for shows, give it that URL, send, and now everything is the order that you would, the kind that you would expect if you were calling from a regular application. It's not going to return a web page, obviously. Another nice thing that we get from those wonderful generic views is we always get options. So whenever we make any posts, it should include the basic information about it. And because we did a create, let me switch this back to a get and add a new one. Let's do a new, call it create show. Make it a post with a, let's just do a multi-part form. It should handle any kind of regular input. So we want to create a new show that has a name of, give me a show. What? Let's do Friends. Okay. And what network was it on? I don't remember.
NBC.
Let's
We'll go with that.
NBC. And the most important thing of all, what do you think its rating is?
Probably 8. Give it 8.
I heard 5 first. Sorry, if you wanted it to be higher or lower, you should have spoken up sooner. So we're going to copy the URL back over here. Authentication credentials were not provided. Now, why do you think that is?
Django's built-in authentication mode, or
Yeah. So back in our settings, how many full screen apps do I have open? We have our default permissions class, which is the Django model permissions or a non-read only, which means if we don't specify a permission class on the view, on a view by view basis, it's going to default to if you are not authenticated, you can only read, you can't make changes. Rather than, that's a good way of, if you want to have an open, API, but want to control who can change the information, that's a good way of doing it. We don't want to change the default permissions class. If you wanted to make it even stricter, you could say you need to be authenticated no matter what. If you wanted to have a non-open API. So let's go into our view here, and what we're going to do is we're going to add permissions classes, which is actually at the very minimum a tuple of blank. So we need, from our REST framework, we can pull in permissions dots, and here's a whole heck of a lot of permissions that we can choose from. So allow any says anyone can do it. We don't care. We can also have, the only people allowed to interact with this must be an admin user on our site. Now, our user that we created to access that admin portal will be allowed to do it. We can also do, this is authenticated or read-only is more or less a different implementation of that default permissions class. Just saying you need to be authenticated or you can only read it. So let's just do allow any. Yeah, if you had a login, create new user and you could log in. What you could do is you could have your regular views set up, because these permissions also will also work for the regular portions of your website. So if you go to facebook.com and you're not logged in, it's not going to, you're not authenticated. It's going to send you to the login here. It's not going to send you to your homepage with the scroll and everything else. So if we do allow any, allow it to reset itself there, go back here, send it again. We now have friends MBC5. Let's pull this, and we now have a bunch of shows. Let's add one more thing, because let's say that we wanted to go in and say delete. We want to make this a full CRUD application. There's something else we need, which is the ID. By default, every model in the Django ORM is given an ID or a primary key. You can use .id and .pk interchangeably. In your code, you prefer pk, but that's more a semantic thing. All we need to do is go down to the serializers for our class here, add ID into it, let it reload, and if we pull these again, we now have the ID 1.2 that everything came with. Now,
does it matter if you use ID or PK?
I don't. Internally, .id and .pk, when you're interacting with the models themselves in the code, there's not really a difference, but PK is preferred because people can go in and change the primary key to be whatever they want. I'm not sure if doing PK here will do the same thing. Yes, it will. So, I'm pretty sure if I added ID into that as well, it would give you ID and PK with the same value. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a whole lot of production-level REST applications built on Django that the JSON that they produce for the REST API are using PK instead of ID. So we have an ID. Now, if we go into our views, let's actually do our dot generics and see all the different ones. So create create, destroy, list, retrieve, update. These are all going to semantic ways of referring to get, put, post, delete, patch. Not in that order. So what we would need to do to have the bare bones CRUD application for this one view is for dash show that one endpoint, because we're not giving it an ID in the URL, it would be our get and post, because you don't need to supply an ID to get a list of all of them, and you don't need an ID to create a new one because you don't know what it is. What we do need to do is, let me get our list create API view back in there. I'm going to create a duplicate of this, and we're going to call this a show ID view, which is going to, instead of a list create, be a retrieve, update, destroy API view, which is going to give us our delete, patch, and push as well. Now, our query set for this kind, we're not doing a show objects.all. What we need to do is have we need to define query set as a method in here so that we can grab the ID from our URL and then return just the model that it needs to or the object that it needs to operate on. And just to make things go quicker, rather than me doing all of that, I'm hoping that I can quickly find an example in here. I think it's get query set. If I'm searching, oh, it was searching. The documentation for Django is the Django site, by the way. Get query set. Cool. So we do get query set self, and we're going to return this is pulling that. We need to do show dot objects dot get. Is it 8:30? Yeah. Okay. So we need to get out. What I'm going to do later, because this is being recorded, is I'm going to tack on the last 10 minutes to get the ID URL put up. I'll push the whole thing up, and then the entire code will be pushed up to the repository at github.com/OrlandoPython. You can just search Orlando Python on there, and it'll be up. And I'll also I'll put everything in the description of the video as well when that gets pushed up to YouTube later tonight. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.
And just because we're getting kicked out of the room, we can continue talking, not outside or not just outside the room because it's a library, but just outside the library. Keep everything quiet, and we'll see you all next month. Yeah. All right, everyone, let's finish up this app very quickly here. So, back to our code. So, what we need to do for this retrieve, update, destroy API view, we need to be able to specify by ID what object we want to pull. That means we need to implement our get query set function here instead of just specifying our query set as all of our objects. So let's actually back up a second here. If we go into our URLs, just kind of, I'm going to copy this. So instead of show view, I think I called it show ID view. Let me double check that. And I'm just going to save that so we get our code completion here. Be show ID view, and there is some special syntax for the URL. This means that we're going to have our root URL, show, and then the integer, which is going to be applied as PK in our arguments, keyword arguments. The first part right here just specifies what type we want to cast it to. So I think we can specify float, but the default is just keeping it a string. I think that's what if it were just like that, you do that, but we want to cast it to an int. So all we need to do is save that. Now we go into our views. This show.objects.get, get is specifically going to pull one object by its primary key. Or is it just by its primary? Typically, I only use it by primary key, which means either ID or PK. I think get just assumes that whatever you are looking for is going to be, there's only one thing that it's going to match to. So for this instance, we're going to match our PK to our quargs. We're going to grab our PK int from our URL, and that's going to be it. Now, that should be the only thing that we need here. So let's go ahead and head back over here. Let's create a new request. We're going to do a retrieve show and just keep it a get because we're going to test our retrieve by ID. So, whoops. Come on, give me there we go. So just give it an ID of 1, and if everything works, this should pull back our Game of Thrones. What am I missing here? If I recall, sometimes I think whenever you change a URL, you need to reboot the server itself. No. Let's check in here. What am I missing? Instead of get, I could try filter instead. Get usually should be able to do it, but maybe query set is expecting a query set as opposed to an individual object. So let's try filter. Why aren't you working? Let's try some print statements because those are always good. That shouldn't actually change anything, just should print out some things when I call it. Huh. Okay, so show ID view in PK. Why are you not updating? Okay, check over here. You know, I just kind of looking at this, my reference in here, I guess it might be smart enough to not need a query set. Hoping it doesn't. Let's just see. Let's just comment all of that. We'll keep our query set here. I think as long as it sees APK in the quargs, it might be smart enough to know that that's what it needs to use. No? The joy of debugging. Check my URLs. Path as view. You know, actually, I think there might be something going on with, you know what? I wonder if we're having an issue with the fact that this is blank. I bet. Okay. Whoa, there's a space in there. The current path. Okay, yeah, so that is expected. But I'm also wondering why in the world is there is this space where there shouldn't be. So what's going on with you? Let me take a look at my, because I know, I think I have run into this problem before, which is why I don't see in my reference a cast list create here, because back in my reference app's main URLs file here, I have that separate, because you'll see I have one, not off. Yeah, so the one without that. Okay, let's try that. This is one of those weird things. I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of that. So actually, just keeping that, keep the show URLs, but I'm also going to do from show.views import show view. That way, we'll just be able to do, I think, yeah, it's just mixing path. Oh, I don't even need URL here. Let's just make everything a path. Let's just keep it consistent within this file. So I can get rid of URL. Let's do shows, because that keeps it consistent with the naming. And also, if you're requesting shows, you're probably expecting a list, whereas a show plus the int, you would be expecting a single show. So let's do show view dot as view. Let's see what pops up. And just to be extra sure, gonna restart the server. Let's see what pops up for show 1. Okay, I still don't know why this extra space is there. Like, you're not supposed to have spaces in an app. So I'm not sure why that is showing up. Let's just search it. Django URLs space. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure why that space is showing up. Yeah, I'm not sure this is exactly what I'm looking for. Something is adding in that space that shouldn't be there. Include dot URLs. Going back, check all the URLs in here. Yeah, NPK. I do not know why. You know, it really could just be that it's complaining about me being a URL. Maybe it prepends it for some weird reason. So let's oh, cannot be right, because it's not conf.urls, it's just django.urls, just like the other one. Yeah, that's it. I guess we just didn't need to use URL in there. We just needed path. That was weird. You wouldn't think that URL would prepend a space like that. I'm not quite sure what was going on there. Anyway, it works now. So we can now look up by ID. So that's our get method. That's the retrieve part of our views right here. And yes, it was smart enough where we don't need to implement a query set. It just knows that I see a PK variable in my quarks, and I'm just going to, essentially what it's doing is it's going to also apply a filter after the all or replace it. Not quite sure what's doing in the back end, but it is smart enough. So just using these two as our views, our generic views, we now have get, put, post, patch, delete. And just to show that we also have those other two, let's say that someone let's say we gave a low rating to friends. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to change this to a patch, and I'm going to change its rating to an 8 because Friends is, I've heard Friends is pretty good. It deserves an 8 out of 10. Well, now it has an 8 out of 10. And if we retrieve our show again, put a 2 in there for our ID, ta-da! It now has an 8. And I'm going to put this back to shows. Ta-da! It has an 8 in our list. And I'm just going to quickly rename this. Update show. And then finally, the last thing that we need, if you're not familiar with the difference between patch or post, put, and patch are, post puts in it adds a brand new object to that table. Put is meant to replace the entirety of an object, so it's as though you were using post, but it's meant to replace the entire object, update it with something entirely new, usually keeping the ID. And patch goes in and updates individual fields. That's why when we did a patch here, we only had to give it rating 8, and it could keep everything else. Now finally, we have delete, which I wonder what delete will do. So all we do is in here is go to delete. I'm going to change this to delete show. And we actually don't have any data associated with the delete. Send 204, no contents. That's the success code, HTTP code for delete. If we try to retrieve our show now, detail not found, and our show list, ta-da, it's gone. So, okay, so we finished that up. We have a full basic CRUD app for a single model. The code, let me actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reorganize this thing here. So we have all of this. I am going to export this current workspace with all of that as, let's do as JSON. Desktop. Thought it would give me a little more control over that. Whatever. That'll be good enough. Export. So there's our Insomnia. Going to drag this into our code repository. So, all right, there's our code. Going back to our guy over here. Yeah, so just clean that up a little bit. One last little look through. We don't need that. Yeah, so we have our serializers with our meta class from earlier. Different things on there. Registered with our admin portal. Our model itself. And that should be it. Now, I am going to end the stream here. What I'm going to do immediately after this recording is I am going to commit all this code and push it into the repository. I'm going to make a couple more changes after that just to productionize the app a little bit to get it ready. We have a proc file in here already. I mentioned this before, and I actually need to change this proc file just a little bit. This is that whiskey server that I mentioned at the top of the talk. But what this proc file is going to do is it defines the runtime, how to start the app on Heroku. And this app is going to be publicly available for people that want to play around with the URLs. The only thing that should be available is that show API, just for letting people add their own data and delete and all of that. This is not going to be up forever on Heroku, but if you want to give it a try just to show that, to play around with the API that we built and just double check what all the code is doing, it will be there. I will eventually turn it off, but the code will live on. And that will be it. So thank you for watching this. We hope to see you at Orlando Python next month and the month after that. And we'll be back to live streaming at some point here soon enough. We just had a couple of internet issues on this laptop. It happens. So see you all next month.